All right. Hello, everybody, or whoever's here. No one's here because we just started, of course. Um, let's see. Okay, so I wanted to start off, the readings with actually a poem by somebody else, not me, because I'm not much of a poet. And the goal of our discussion today, the readings, is I want to read some of the translations that I have of the Iliad, and I'm hoping to kind of help you see what's going on with the Iliad, give you a little context, explain some of it, hopefully make it interesting to you, and give you that context that I think is useful. But the Iliad and the Odyssey in particular, but I think the Iliad even more than the Odyssey, is just so prevalent in our culture and in the world that we live in that we don't even really realize it. And, so what I've tried to do is, and I'll explain some of this more, again, if anybody has questions, I'll explain more in a little bit. But I've created a young adult version in modern English verse of the Iliad. And my goal was to actually have a translation of the actual Iliad. Now, what does that mean? Well, the actual Iliad is in ancient Greek. So it's not that actual. It's a translation. And if you know anything about language, you know that just like the telephone game or just like any kind of interpretation, there's just cultural values. There's things that are not there anymore. There's just meanings that aren't as present or just completely incapable of being captured in the way that it was originally in the Greek. And in fact, a Greek scholar's job is to go in and try to really understand the Greek qua Greek, that as the ancient Greeks would have understood it to the best of their abilities. That's a very difficult job to have. So no matter what, a translation is going to be an interpretation, and it's going to be based on the interpreter in a lot of ways. I've read some of the Emily Wilson translation. I haven't read the whole thing yet, and I've liked a lot of it. I don't have any problems with it at all. I think it's good. She got a lot of flack. I haven't really seen where this is coming from, to be perfectly honest, but she got a lot of flack for using what people called woke language. And I thought, I'd like to see more examples of this. I didn't see that many clear examples of what they mean by that. She's definitely using more modern language, but that's kind of what you want to do with the translation. So what I tried to do with my translation is I'm actually aiming toward young adults. My goal was that a 10-year-old could pick up this book and actually read the language. Now, I don't recommend a 10-year-old doing this because there's a complexity to the story, and I think you need a guide to help you through it. My hope was that 13 to 17-year-olds, so junior high school, that they would be the ones who would really be getting this. Now, if you're just joining us, please if you're on YouTube, or subscribe, share this so more people can see it. I also want to, now that we have some people joining, I want some people to go to, after this is done, at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time tonight, my friend Luke Travers is doing a salon, and you have to go to Facebook for this. And this is a salon of celebrating Michelangelo's birthday. So it's his Euro Salon number 21. I'm not sure if I can actually share this anywhere using the platform that I have. But if you go to Facebook, type in Euro Salon number 21, Michelangelo's birthday, you might be able to find it. If not, let me know and I'll try to find a way to get it to you. But definitely try to go to that Euro Salon. It's right after this, so I'm gonna join that as well. Okay, so let's get into the first thing I wanted to discuss. Thank you all for joining. Please ask any questions on my new translation of the Iliad in modern English verse for young adults. My hope was that a 10-year-old would be able to read it. My aim is to actually try to sell it to junior highs, high schools, home schools as a core part of a literature curriculum. I think every human should read the Iliad. And I can talk a little bit more about that as we go, but I think it's a core part of our of the world that we live in and ourselves that we need to understand. So much comes from this. So the first thing I wanted to read really quickly is actually a poem that by John Keats that I first heard from a great great literature teacher and the founder of a school, Lisa Van Dam. And you can find her stuff, Van Dam Academy. I think it's VANDAMME. And she does a lot of great talks and lectures, and she has Read With Me podcast. And a while back, she gave a talk on this John Keats and a poem on first looking into Chapman's Homer. I don't think I had read that poem at that point, so I was really impacted by it. So I'm going to read this poem very quickly, and it's a sonnet, so it's very short. But I think it's a good introduction into what we're going to talk about today in my readings. So the poem, let's see if I can actually share my screen. All this messy stuff. Let's see. Can you guys see this? I see there's people there. I don't know if this is a good reading of it. Can you guys see that? Let me make it a little bigger. Okay. Let me just read this real quick, and then I'm going to point out a couple things. We're not going to do a deep analysis of this one, but it is a poem I've grown to love. John Keats, he's early 1800s to like 1825, 1822, something like that. He died very young. Okay, so here's the poem. Much have I traveled in the realms of gold, and many goodly states and kingdoms seen. Round many western islands have I been, which bards in fealty to Apollo hold. Oft of one wide expanse had I been told that deep-browed Homer ruled as his demesne. Yet did I never breathe its pure serene, till I heard Chapman speak out loud and proud and bold. Then felt I like some watcher of the skies, when a new planet swims into his ken, or like stout Cortez, when with eagle eyes he stared at the Pacific, and all his men looked at each other with a wild surmise, silent upon a peak in Darien. So just a real quick analysis of this is, so he's basically saying, and this is relevant to what we're going to talk about today, that he has gone on literary journeys. He's traveled in the realms of gold. He's gone to the lands of Mycenaean Empire. He's gone to Thebes, the mythical land in Sparta, in ancient Greek. He's gone to Venice in the 1300s, or to Paris, or in the 1400s. He's gone to all these realms of gold, these literary imaginative realms. Many goodly states. So he's gone to all these different kingdoms, the Byzantine, the goodly states and kingdoms. And he's gone many western islands have I been, which bards in fealty to Apollo, god of poetry, hold. Oft of one wide expanse, so think like that TV show The Expanse, like space, but just this large area. Often of one wide expanse, so a gap that he doesn't have, essentially. Had I been told that deep-browed Homer, that's wise, right, if you have those deep brows, ruled as his domain, that's his area. That's the land of Troy and the ancient story of Troy. Yet did I never breathe its pure serene, till I heard Chapman speak out loud and bold. And Chapman was 1611, a translator of the Iliad into English. So what Keats is saying is that he had heard about this land of Troy in the Trojan War, but he didn't understand it and he didn't experience it for himself until he read a translation. So you see the relevance here. Then felt I like some watcher of the sky. What's another word for watchers of the skies? Astronomer, maybe. So imagine you're an astronomer and you see a new planet swim into your ken, your world view, or your view. That would be a pretty big, astonishing thing, right? And if you are someone who spent your whole life looking at the skies, trying to see something, and you see something brand new, that's a big deal. And that's what he's saying, reading Chapman, this translation was like for him. He'd gone to all these imaginative worlds, but he finally was able to experience it, the Iliad, through Chapman's translation. Or like stout Cortez, when with eagle eyes he stared at the Pacific. By the way, I don't think Cortez actually was the first one to see the Pacific, but we can move on from that. So he's like an adventurer who's gone his whole life traveling the world, exploring, but he's never been able to actually see the Pacific. It's a new thing that he's experienced as an explorer. Well, that's what John Keats, as a poet and a reader of imaginative literature, is saying about reading Chapman's Homer. And then the end, there's a kind of wild surmise as they are basically stunned into silence in a peak in Darien. That's, I think, in Panama. So I just wanted to kind of start with that. And then we're going to go into some of the readings. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know. My hope is that you check out my Kickstarter, and you can support my project there. The Kickstarter, by the way, is primarily a test on my part to see if there is at least enough interest to get this out there. I think that Kickstarter is a really good testing ground for these types of things. At least that's what I'm understanding in my reading of the where the publishing industry is. So I'm hoping to find out that I can raise enough money to create this product that I've already written all 24 books of. They're all translated. And now I need to do the interior designing. I need to get a graphic designer. I need to do all these things. So I'm hoping, that's what the Kickstarter will be. I did not realize that there's not really an easy way for me to, I don't think I can. Oh, there are. I didn't even have the comments pointed up. I think I can do this. Okay, so there's my Kickstarter. I'm just putting it in there. Let me address some of these comments. So Mark says, I haven't heard any of this version yet, but would it eventually make for a good graphic novel? Well, if you're talking about the Iliad, there he is. If you're talking about the Iliad, I'm pretty sure the Iliad has, I don't know about a graphic novel, but it's definitely been turned into movies and other things. So yes, I think what I'm trying to do is different than what's often done when trying to reach new people. So what's often done, and I think it's great that this is done, I want more people to do more of this, by the way, is what I would call reimaginings or retellings. And a reimagining is basically Madeline Miller's Song of Achilles. It's Troy, the movie with Brad Pitt, which is not at all the Iliad. It takes place in that era. It's telling certain stories, but it's not actually what Homer wrote to the degree that we have that today. And that's what I was trying to give. I was trying to give younger people the grand epic verse version, because to have a meter, which the point of a meter is that it gives you a kind of cadence that's like a war cadence, and it just has a different vibe than a prose version, which again I like the prose version a lot too, but it's I wanted to keep it in that realm. So Enric, by the way, sorry I missed this one earlier, Enric, but I think Keats, I think he wrote this around 1816, and I think he dies like 1822 or 25. I think 25. So, and he was only like 24 or 20. So I think he was born early 1800s. Off the top of my head, I'm forgetting his exact dates. Okay, so you said that twice. So again, thank you for comments. Please, any comments you have, just put them in here, and now I can see all comments. And also share this, if you think people might be interested. I'm going to do my first reading. Yes, Keats is fairly modern, Enric. He is, he's a, what I call the second generation of the English Romantics. So you have Blake, Wordsworth, Coleridge, I think are the main big three of the first generation. And then you have Keats, Byron, and Percy Shelley in what I would think of as the second. Okay, let me do a reading, because that's what you guys are all here for. And I've already been talking for too long without the reading. So thank you guys for your patience. What I'm going to read first is the quarrel between Achilles and Agamemnon. Now, let me just set the scene a little bit. This is actually book 1. So I'm not going to read the very beginning of book 1. I'm going to read once they start their contention, the conflict, which I think serves as the primary motivation for the whole story itself. It's the sing to me goddess of the rage of Achilles, the Achilles' wrath that sets off all the action of the Iliad. Now, a couple things that are important to know about the Iliad that I want to really quickly make clear before I read this and the other excerpts. So, if you're not familiar with the story, you have a Greek expeditionary force going into essentially the Middle East. That's where Troy basically is. And they're going to get back the woman that was abducted from Menelaus, the king of Sparta, his wife Helen, who Paris has abducted. And the reason they're going back is because there was a pact between all the kings throughout the Grecian or the Mycenaean Empire at that time for the marriage of Menelaus and Helen, which was if anything happened to her, people would, if something happened, if she left or whatever, everyone would be involved in this and they would leave and go find her or get her back. This is an issue of honor, right? And honor is a big deal, particularly in the Iliad. Now, by the way, none of this is in the Iliad. This is stuff that everyone at the time would have known, and this is important to know when you're reading the Iliad. So the Greeks send a massive army over to Troy. There's a Trojan War that goes on for 10 years. There's basically equal fighting on both sides, and the Greeks are constantly sacking and attacking different towns and cities, including one city where Achilles, the greatest warrior of the Greek side, captures a woman and turns her into his slave girl, essentially, Briseis. And that's where the beginning of the argument between Achilles, the greatest warrior, and Agamemnon, the leader of the Greek expeditionary force. So he's the one that essentially is set by God, by Zeus, the all-powerful, to be in charge of this expeditionary force. But Achilles is the greatest actual fighter here. And so there's a conflict between them at this moment when a plague is set upon the Greek army by a god, and the demand is to return Chryseis, this is confusing, which is a woman taken by Agamemnon. So basically God demands the prize that was given to Agamemnon, and in retribution to this, he actually then takes the prize given to Achilles. And then they fight or verbally joust over this, and they're very angry. So I'm going to read this. This, again, happens book 1. If you have questions while I'm going through it, just write it in write a comment, and I will go through it. And, after I'm done reading, it's not super long. So this is after the taking of, or the Agamemnon saying he will take Briseis from Achilles. Then swift Achilles, anger in his voice, replied with scornful words against the king. You shameless man, so greedy and so sly. Why would the Greeks all follow you with trust or fight their hardest in the heat of war? I did not come to fight the Trojans' spears for my own sake. They never harmed my lands. The Trojans never raided Pythia's fields, nor drove away our cattle or my steeds. Between us lie the mountains and the seas, the high, wide mountains, shadowed, dark, immense. We came because of you, great, greedy king, to win back honor for your brother's name, and for yourself, the king who knows no shame. But now you care not for the Greeks at all, and threaten to take away what I've earned in war? I worked so hard for that, the prize I hold, given by the army, justly won by me. When Greeks attack the walls of Troy, it's me, my hands that do the hardest work of all. But when the gains are counted at day's end, the greatest share is handed over to you. I take the smallest, but I bear it back to rest beside my ships when I am done. Now I'll return to my home, for it's far more worth my time than staying here in vain. I do not think you're worth my fighting for, nor will you pay me what you promised here." Then Agamemnon answered with cold scorn, "Go if you wish. Your heart is full of pride. I beg you not to stay here at my side. I have the favor of the mighty gods, and others here will honor me as well. But of all the kings, I hate you the most, for you love quarrels, battles, endless fights. Yes, you're strong, but that's no gift of yours. A god has given you that strength alone. Now leave. Go home and lead your myrmidons. I do not care or fear your wrathful heart. But know this well, and let all hear my words. As Apollo takes the girl away from me, I'll send her back across the sea in ships, but I will come and take your prize instead, the lovely Briseis, given by the Greeks. So you will know how much more strong I am, and none may dare to claim to be my equal." He spoke, and fiery anger filled the heart of brave Achilles, torn within his soul. Should he pull out his sword beside his thigh and rise to strike the mighty king in rage? Or calm his heart and hold his anger back? As these thoughts stormed inside his chest and mind, he reached to draw his heavy, mighty sword. But suddenly Athena came from heaven, sent by the kind command of Hera's will, who loved them both and cared for all the Greeks. Athena stood behind Achilles then, and seized his golden hair, unseen by all, invisible to all but him alone. Achilles halted, startled by her touch, then quickly turned to see the goddess there, and knew her by the blazing of her eyes. He spoke to her with sudden wary words. "Why have you come, O daughter born of Zeus? Have you come down to witness Agamemnon and see the insults that he's thrown at me? But let me tell you, and I think I'm right, this boasting will soon lead him to his doom." Then bright-eyed Athena spoke in calm reply. "I came to stop your anger in its tracks, if you will listen to the gods' command. I came from high Olympus at the word of Hera, queen of heaven, who loves you both. So stop the fight and put away your sword. Don't strike, but use your words to shame the king. One day you'll be repaid 3 times over for the dishonor Agamemnon brings. Be patient now, trust me, and hold your fire." Then swift Achilles answered her at once. "Goddess, I know your word is always strong, and though my heart is wrathful, I will yield. A warrior must listen to the gods and bow." With that he placed his mighty hand upon the silver hilt and thrust the great sword back into its sheath, as Athena had asked. Then she returned to heaven, leaving them, her mission done, to stand with Zeus again. But still, Achilles' anger had not cooled. He faced the king and spoke with biting words. "You wine-soaked fool, with shameless dog-like eyes and heart as soft and timid as a deer. You care not for the wars on open fields, nor ever join the fights with brave Greek men. It's easier for you to take away the prizes of your captains with cruel hands. You act the coward and devour their spoils. But you would never face the battle's edge. And now you threaten me with loss and pain, but know this, mark my words and hear me well. By this scepter, which will never sprout a leaf, now carved and shaped by human hands, once green, but now carried by leaders of the Greeks, who stand for justice and protect the law, I swear to you, a day will surely come when all the Greeks will cry out for my help. The men will fall, cut down by Hector's hand, and you will weep, but I will not fight then. You'll tear your heart in sorrow, full of grief, when you see what you've lost because of me." So that was the little section. That's just book one. We call it book 1. It's chapter 1. Just a little section just to give you a taste of the translation. And I hope you see that the language is approachable. I think you can understand it. I was reading it as I think it should be read, essentially, with a little bit of, a little bit of enthusiasm, but not too much, hopefully. And but it's also actually not in prose, so there actually is a cadence to it, and you can kind of you can kind of see it. The men will fall, cut down by Hector's hand, and you will weep, but I will not fight then. So there's an iambic pentameter is what it's called. That's in there that lends itself, I think, to the natural cadence of speaking in English. So just a couple thoughts on that passage. And again, if you have any questions, just go ahead and send them in there. Also, after this is done, I hope you'll go check out Luke Travers' event. He's doing a salon after this, and celebrating Michelangelo's 550th birthday or something like that, where he's going to do some of the lesser known paintings of Michelangelo. So I hope you'll check that out. So an important part of the Iliad that I tried to express in the thank you, Henrik, that I tried to express in the actual story, in the translation, but I think does require a little bit of outside explanation, is some of the cultural values of the Greeks. And two important concepts in the Iliad are really helpful to use that you kind of see playing out in this sequence that we just read. And that is the concepts of kleos and time, spelled time, Time. And those two concepts, I think, are absolutely essential to the understanding of this story. And it's because it's what motivates all of the characters, including the Trojans. I think they're all kind of enwrapped in these two concepts. And the concepts translate essentially to glory and honor. But glory and honor in a way that is a little different, or quite a bit different than how we understand it. So I was thinking about glory, and glory in a sense, represents the what a hero earns through great deeds in battle, but it's really represented in stuff. So the more glorious you are, the more deeds you do, the more stuff you get. You get the women, you get the gold, the tripods, the animals, the steeds, the working people, the workers, the peasants type people. That's what you get if you do the most deeds. And in this case, it's a warlike culture, so the deeds are war deeds. So that, I think, is a critical part of this, is that you have these war deeds, and then the glory is represented in the stuff you get, the pile of goods. And that's the real reason why Achilles is so pissed, is because they have taken away arbitrarily, in his mind, the war deed, the glory that he's gotten, his kleos, which is Briseis. And in fact, the whole story is kind of set off by this when Helen is taken. That's taking away the stuff of Menelaus, and the highest of all prizes, his wife. And so that sets off all the action. And the Trojans, after 10 years, don't give her up. Well, partly because that would give up their kleos, their glory. And the same thing with the Trojans. So that's glory. It's stuff. This is the culture that they live in. One way to translate this might be something like pay, I guess, would be the best way to put it in a modern sense. And Achilles is mad because he thinks he's been unjustly paid and he's not getting the compensation he deserves for the work that he does. So he's the great general fighter. Agamemnon's more like a CEO who's stepping back and just kind of directing things. And sometimes there's contention between those two. I mean, we know there's a whole philosophy called Marxism that kind of put that together in a pretty comprehensive way, explaining this tension between the worker and the producer in that sense. The other one is time, and that is the honor and respect a person is accorded by others. So this one is specifically how other people see you. And these two concepts, kleos and time, are intertwined. So how people see you is often represented by how much glory you have, represented by how much stuff you get. So, for instance, at the at the end of a sacking of a city of Troy, let's say, you would divvy up all of the goodies that you got from that, and you would divvy it up based on who did the most deeds, which is based on the honor or what people said about that person. So if you had the most good stuff, you got the most. If you did the most and people recognized you did the most, then you should get the most. And that's what happens with Briseis and things like that. So it's an attack on his honor and glory. And this is what, and you can almost see the kind of differences that Agamemnon, I think, represents honor more. And that's what he's interested in more. What people say about him, that they recognize he's the greatest leader and the great leader of them all. And Achilles is more focused on kleos, glory. He wants the stuff. Now kleos is also has a kind of aspect of it, which again goes to, both of them are intertwined, but has the aspect of it of your deeds living on past you. And this is how you attain immortality, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Okay, I wanted to read another section here. So I want to give you some pathos here, a little drama, internal emotional sadness. And this is the story or the section of Hector and Andromache, or Andromache. Now, this is a really interesting one. There's so many interesting things in this book, but this story is Hector the Trojan, who is, so he's the enemy of the Greeks. Remember, Homer is a Greek, and he's writing to a Greek audience. And some of the most powerful moments is a Trojan enemy, and he's drawing this parallel, he's giving you, humanizing this character and really making you like him. So Hector is the leader of the Trojan forces. He's the equivalent of Achilles, except that Hector is purely mortal. He has two human parents, whereas Achilles, his mother is Thetis, and she's a goddess. His father is Peleus, and Peleus is mortal. Thetis is immortal. She lives forever. She's a goddess. So in war stories, and you might have seen the movie Troy, there's often a lot of raw emotional moments. There's a lot that kind of show the human cost of war. And that's what this scene kind of is. Hector, a celebrated warrior and prince of Troy, returns home to find that his beloved wife Andromache has left in a state of deep anguish. She's left their rooms. She fears not only for his safety in the impending battle, but also for the uncertain future that awaits their family. This moment, though, set in an ancient world, speaks to the universal pain of saying goodbye and the sacrifice that duty often demands. So I like war movies a lot. I like war shows. I like war documentaries and all those good things. This is a good illustration of where a lot of this comes from and the power of it, that it harkens back thousands of years. And that Homer chose the Iliad. Here's another little anecdote. The Iliad is, in ancient times, was preferred to the Odyssey, whereas in modern times it's reverse. We tend to like the Odyssey more in modern times, and it's an interesting thing to think about why. I don't think that's wrong in any way, but it's an interesting thing to think about. Okay, so here's Hector and Andromache's farewell. Andromache, I need to get used to saying it one way because I've heard it multiple ways. Andromache begs Hector not to leave, fearing his death will leave her and their son alone. Hector comforts her by resolves to return to battle. Okay, here we go. So Hector was just speaking to her. Here's where it opens up this passage. So saying, helmeted great Hector left and swiftly reached his well-established home. But there he did not find his faithful wife, white-armed Andromache, within the halls. With child and maid, she'd gone to watch the walls, and stood there weeping bitter, anxious tears. When Hector found she wasn't there, he paused upon the threshold and inquired of all the serving women gathered in the house. Come, tell me truly now, where did she go? My white-armed wife Andromache. Say where? Did she go to see my sisters or their wives, or to Athena's temple with the others, where noble Trojan women make their prayers? Then spoke a busy servant in reply. Hector, since you ask us earnestly, she did not go to any of these places. She heard the Trojans are hard pressed in war, and that the Greeks are gaining mighty strength. She ran toward the towering city wall, distraught. The nurse went with her, carrying your little son held safely in her arms. So spoke the servant, and at once swift Hector left his home and hurried down the streets, passing through the well-built city ways. When he arrived beneath the city's gates, the Seion gates, through which he'd crossed the plain, there came his wife Andromache to meet him, daughter of brave Aeson, who ruled the wooded lands of Thebes and Cilicia. She ran to him, and with her came the nurse, holding their little son, so soft and young, Hector's beloved child, as fair as a star. His father called him Scamandrius at home, but all the people named him Astyanax, because his father was their city's hope. Hector smiled in silence as he saw his son, but near him stood Andromache in tears. She clasped his hand and spoke to him and said, Dear husband, your brave spirit will destroy you. You have no pity for your infant son, nor me, your wife, who soon will be bereft. For soon the Greeks will kill you in the fight, and I shall be a widow full of grief. It would be better if I lost my life, for after you are gone, no joy remains, only deep sorrow. I have no father, no mother now to comfort me at all. For my dear father fell to Achilles' hand when he destroyed the city where we lived, lofty Thebes beneath Mount Placis' shade. He killed my father, yet respected him, not stripping off his armor where he fell, but burned his body clothed in war's fine gears, and raised a burial mound. The mountain nymphs, daughters of Zeus, placed elms around his grave. I had 7 brothers in my father's house. All journeyed down one day to death's dark realm, for swift Achilles killed them as they tended our sheep and cattle in the mountain fields. My mother, queen beneath the wooded hill, he took, but later freed her for a ransom. Yet Artemis struck her with deadly shafts, and she is gone as well. You are my all, my father, mother, brother, and my love. So pity me and stay here on the wall. Do not make me a widow, and your son an orphan, left alone without his father. Place your men here beside the fig tree's roots, where once the wall is weak and can be scaled. 3 times the bravest Greeks have tried that spot. Great Ajax, Idomeneus, Atreus' sons, and fierce Diomedes too. Perhaps a seer has shown them, or they feel an urge within to breach us there and conquer all of Troy. Then Hector of the shining helm replied, All this I know too well, my dearest wife, but I would feel deep shame before the men and long-robed women of our Trojan town if I, like some base coward, stayed away, unseen among the brave who fight for Troy. My heart will not permit this. I learned to always be courageous and to fight among the foremost warriors of Troy, to win great glory for my father's name, for deep within my heart and mind I know that the day will come when sacred Troy must fall, and Priam's line and people will be lost. But then all the pain of Trojan men, or even Hecuba's or Priam's grief, or that of all my brothers who will fail, it is your fate that weighs upon my soul when some bronze-clad Grecian leads you off, in tears, a captive, bound for distant lands, to Greek lands, weaving at a stranger's loom, or drawing water from a foreign well, oppressed by cruel fate and harsh command. Then someone, seeing you, will say, Behold, This is the wife of Hector, bravest one of all the horse-taming Trojan warriors. When they fought round their city, so they'll say, and you will grieve anew, deprived of me, a man who might have kept that day away. But let me die before I hear your cries, or see you taken in such cruel distress. So saying, glorious Hector reached to hold his son, who frightened drew back, cried, and clung to his nurse's flowing robe in sudden fear. He shrank from shining bronze and horsehair crest that nodded fearsome from his father's helm. Then Hector and his wife both laughed aloud. At once brave Hector took his helmet off and set it gleaming on the ground nearby. He kissed his dear son, held him in his arms, and lifted up his prayer to Zeus above. O Zeus, and all you gods, please grant that this, my son, may be like me, a noble man, strong and brave, and ruling here in Troy. May people say he's greater than his father when he returns with treasures from the fight. And may his mother's heart feel boundless joy. So speaking, he returned the boy to her. His wife embraced him in her fragrant arms, smiling through tears. Her husband felt her grief. He gently touched her with his hand and said, My dearest wife, don't grieve too much for me. No man will send me to my death before my time has come, and fate's a thing that none can flee, not coward nor a hero brave. So go home and tend to your own tasks, the weaving and the spinning. Guide your maids, for war's the work of men who guard this town, and most of all, the work that falls to me. Thus saying, mighty Hector donned his helm with horsehair crest and went upon his way. His loving wife returned toward her home, turning all at times and shedding many tears. She soon arrived within her well-built house and found her maids inside. Together they all mourned for Hector, though he was alive, for none believed he'd come back from the war. Okay, so that is Andromache, and Hector. So I hope you're seeing that the Kickstarter, or that the translation I've done is approachable. And I think it's really, but that is the Iliad. That's the Iliad, right? Like there's definitely some changes I've made in terms of toning it to the level of a 10-year-old. Thank you, Henrik. I'm going to put that up here. Appreciate that. But yeah, it's definitely at the level of a 10-year-old. And in terms of the level of the height of language readability. But I think, like Henrik saying, I wanted to have the cadence of the poetry and to, maintain the beauty as much as possible of that poetry, but put it in a modern sense. So not using archaic language, not using words that don't mean what they meant before. And there's a lot of this if you read some of the most, if you read Chapman, as I mentioned at the beginning, that was 1611. A lot of that, if you read that, I might even have it somewhere. It is dense and difficult and, a whole challenge in and of itself. And I think there's some beauty to it for sure, but it's really difficult. Let me just read you one little section here of this. So this is from Chapman. This is the beginning part. Actually, let me try and find the. Here we go. No, let me find it here. Sorry, one more second. I'm trying to find what I was reading earlier. Well, whatever. I'm just going to read the very beginning. This is Sing to Me, O, Muse of the Wrath of Achilles. Apollo's priest to the Argive fleet doth bring gifts for his daughter, prisoner to the king. No, I read the wrong thing. Achilles' baneful wrath resound, O goddess that imposed infinite sorrows on the Greeks and many brave souls lost. From breasts heroic, sent them far to that invisible cave that no light comforts, and their limbs to dogs and vultures gave. So that's just the first line or two. Let me just read the same exact thing from mine. Sing, goddess of Achilles' deadly wrath, that brought such sorrow to the Greeks in war, and sent the souls of heroes down to Hades, their bodies left unburied on the ground, for hungry dogs and birds to tear apart. This fate was sealed by Zeus from that first day, when bitter words arose between two men, Achilles, bold and best among the Greeks, and Agamemnon, Atreus' prideful son. So, now, that's not what, so that's Chapman, the one on first looking into Chapman's Homer by Keats. That's not what Emily Wilson did, to be clear. That's not what Fagles did. That's not what Lattimore did. That's not what Evie Ryu did. Those are other translators that I like. But, I don't want to, go through all those. It's not the point of today to kind of compare all the different translations. But my translation, I think, hopefully you'll see and you've heard, gives you a kind of approachability for anyone of any age. Okay, so I'm trying to think. I think I have time maybe for one more reading. Thank you for sticking around. Yeah, I guess I will end with this one. I have a whole bunch of little selections, but we don't have time. And again, if you have any questions about any of this stuff, please just let me know. So I did, well, let me put it this way. So there's a poem that I really love, and it's written in World War I. It's called I Saw a Man This Morning by Patrick Shaw Stewart. So again, I really like war stories a lot. And Patrick Shaw Stewart was an actual British soldier who fought in World War I. He was also a poet. He's also an example I use of the destruction of the imaginative faculties in the West, which is present in the fact that we don't really have great poets anymore, but also that we don't have normal people who appreciate great poetry. Like it's such a weird thing to talk about this, that very few people in the West really love poetry unless you're like a literature person. But if you're science, math, but that was, for all of human history, that was not the case. The case was that everyone had an appreciation of poetry. Some people were more inclined and better at it. And other people, were better at math and sciences and other things, but they all had an appreciation for poetry, because poetry is universal. It's human. It's emotion. We all have emotions, even if you don't. Because I know some people think they don't have emotions, or at least they act like they don't. So Patrick Shaw Stewart was a World War I soldier who went out to fight, and he was on leave, and he was fighting in basically the area where Troy is, the kind of Middle Eastern area today, is what we call it. And so he wrote this poem because he knew the Iliad, as everybody did at that time. Any educated person knew the Iliad for the most part. And he wrote a poem about it. And I'm going to read the poem, and then I'm going to read the section that it kind of refers to, and then talk about it. We'll end there. And again, after this at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time is Luke's event. So I'm going to go to that to talk about Michelangelo's painting. So make sure you join me there. Okay. So the poem is called I Saw a Man This Morning. And again, this is a World War I veteran, a World War I soldier who's on leave for a couple of days before he goes back to the fighting. So he's been fighting. He's on leave. He writes this poem, and he's going to go back to the fighting soon. Here's the poem. I saw a man this morning who did not wish to die. I ask and cannot answer, if otherwise wish I. Fair broke the day this morning against the Dardanelles. The breeze blew soft, the morn's cheeks were cold as cold's seashells. But other shells are waiting across the Aegean Sea, shrapnel and high explosive, shells and hells for me. Oh, hell of ships and cities, hell of men like me. Fatal second heaven, Helen, why must I follow thee? Achilles came to Troyland, and I to Chersonese. He turned from wrath to battle, and I from 3 days' peace. Was it so hard, Achilles? So very hard to die? Thou knewest, and I know not. So much the happier I. I will go back this morning from Imbros over the sea. Stand in the trench, Achilles, flame-capped, and shout for me. Now I'm going to talk about that in just a minute, give you just kind of an explanation of the poem. But first I want to read what it's referring to. Now it's referring, of course, to Achilles went to Troyland. He went to Troy. It's referring to the fact that Achilles knew he was going to die, and he when he went into this war. So unlike most soldiers, Achilles is in the place of knowing if he goes to fight, he will die, but his name will live forever. If he goes home, he will live a normal life, but his name will die when he dies, and his name will not live in immortality. And and Achilles goes from wrath to battle. And if you know why, it's because his friend Patroclus was killed, and it brings him back into the war after he and Agamemnon have this fight, and Achilles leaves for several books of the Iliad, and lots of Greeks die because of it. So the Greek war soldiers are not doing well. The Trojans are now pushing back. They've killed Patroclus, who's one of the great warriors with Achilles, and they're pushing back against the Greeks. And this is in book 18 that they've killed Achilles. They killed Patroclus. Achilles has discovered this. He's been told, and he is furious. But he has no armor because his armor was worn by Patroclus when he went to fight Hector, and Hector took his armor. So he's trying to figure out what to do to do something, because now his friend has died, and he's trying to get back into the battle. Iris, by the way, is one of the messenger gods. It'll be mentioned here. When Iris finished, she returned to heaven, yet Achilles, Zeus's friend, remained in place. Then mighty Athena, goddess of wisdom, shrouded his broad shoulders in a soft cloud and crowned his head with golden, streaming light. And from that light a glowing flame did rise, like smoke that rises from a town by sea, where townsfolk battle foes throughout the day, yet raise their torches high into the sky, so that far allies may come to lend their aid. Thus, from Achilles' head the flames soared high. Then Achilles strode toward the trench and stood, yet did not join the Greeks in further fight. He heeded well his mother's wise command, and standing there, he let a mighty cry resound, while Athena, ever loud, stirred terror deep within the Trojan ranks, like a trumpet's blast that sounds round cities under siege, so clear did his strong voice rise. And when the Trojans heard that bronze-filled cry, their hearts were shaken, filled with sudden fear. Their splendid horses, manes like silken strands, spun round in panic, sensing pain ahead. The charioteers grew still at endless fire that blazed above the head of Peleus' son Achilles. The flames set forth by bright-eyed Athena shone. 3 times did Achilles cry aloud, and 3 times both the Trojans and their comrades were thrown into fight, scattering like drifting dust. 12 of their finest men fell in the rush, falling beside both horses and their spears. Meanwhile, the Greeks raised cheers and thanks to see Patroclus' body saved from harm. They laid him gently down upon a bed, while friends wept sorrow for their dear loss. Achilles followed, tears of grief in flow, to gaze upon his friend, by bronze affrighted, the very one he sent with chariot and steeds, who would not evermore return to him. The Queen Hera sent the blazing sun forth against its will, down to the ocean stream, to put an end to that harsh day of war. The sun sank low, and all the Greeks felt glad to rest from fighting and the clash of swords. The Trojans, weary from the strain of battle, released their horses, tired from endless war, and gathered standing still in fear and shock. None dared to sit, for dread had seized their hearts, for they had seen Achilles on the field, for long it had been since he fought in battle. So before I go into an explanation of that, I wanted to answer Enric. Thank you, Enric, for all the support. Yeah, I think that was part of it, Enric. So Enric is asking, was the love for poetry because oratory was more common before? Yes, I mean, I suspect there's a little more to it than that, in the sense that, well, no, you know what? Now that I think about it, yes, I think that's absolutely correct. I think it's an era where there's less writing, so the way you're communicating is through poetry or through oratory. So poetry lends itself to oratory. Poetry should be read aloud. It should never be just read in your head. This is why so many people don't like poetry, because it's a form of communication in that sense. So yes, I think that is part of it. And if you read the canonical works from Homer down to Ayn Rand, for instance, you'll notice that a lot of what starts to happen over hundreds and even thousands of years is the written word language takes a kind of interesting life of its own. And the rise of the novel has a very large impact on culture. And part of the lament of the Romantics is the loss of the immediate interaction between you and nature that happens when you just read books. And this becomes a big contention in stories throughout the world. In fact, for the Literary Canon Club, we're doing Don Quixote right now. And that's written 1605. And a big part of that is this guy, this Hidalgo, this middle-class man, goes mad because he's only reading books. He's in his room just reading book after book after book, particularly of pastoral romances and particularly chivalric stories. So he's reading these stories and he's trying to go out and then he wants to live them, but he doesn't realize that it's a distortion of reality. It's not actual reality. And that's partly what happens when you get a reading-only culture versus oratory. So there's an interesting whole thing going on here about oratory and poetry and the love of that, but also its connection to your soul and relationship to the world around you. Prose is a wonderful invention. It's an invention. So I think poetry is more natural. I mean, there's still techniques and things you do, but it actually is trying to capture the emotions and the way that you actually speak. I know that's counterintuitive to us today. We think prose is natural, verse is not, but no. Verse is natural. Verse comes first. Prose is something you do to language. You impose through, these logical ways of speaking. And I think they're wonderful. It's how you get scientific treatises. It's how you get the scientific method. It's how you get production. Amazing things. I'm big on prose. I love prose. But verse is how you get into I think the deeper moral truths, the emotional truths. And we're losing a lot by not having verse, I think. I think we're losing something really critical in our world. So I know that was a long answer to your question. Was the love for poetry because oratory was more common before? I think the simple answer is yes. But there's obviously a lot going on here in terms of its development over the time, and in my opinion, the loss that we have recently in history, and that means over the last 100, 150 years, by absconding in the West from verse. I think that's a major problem we have. I would even argue I'm an atheist, we're seeing the rise of religion, and if you go to a church, they're pretty good at using verse in the church on some level. to kind of unite everybody. This is another important thing that happens, and it emotionally connects everybody. And I actually think that's a very good thing in the connection part. The problem is I don't agree with what their ends tend to be for Christians or religionists in general, not just Christians. So in the story I was just reading, the flame-capped Achilles, you see Achilles who's gone from the war, and we'll end with this, and then we'll go to Luke's event, which I'm excited to go see. That Achilles has left the war after 10 years of fighting, and he's been the dominant protector, and he's been kind of helping win this war. Achilles is wronged. He leaves the war, and then through book after book after book of the Iliad, people are dying. Greeks are dying a lot, and they're losing overall, for the most part. Although there's moments when they're kind of winning too. And at this moment, Patroclus has been killed. The lines are being pushed back. You could kind of feel the lines of the armies. They're starting to buckle. And then Achilles, essentially naked, no armor, right? Like essentially naked, but he's got this divine flame cap. It's like a flame capped Achilles, and they use imagery of like when a town is on fire. That's how Homer writes. And that's why I think reading the Homer is so important, because you get these metaphors that you don't get in modern times anymore. So the flame is like a town being sieged and it's on fire. And then when he goes, he yells, but it's this divine yell that's amplified by Athena and Hera. And it's like blasting. It's like a trumpet blast, but it's not just any trumpet blast. It's the trumpet blast when your town is sieged. And that is, what the Greeks are seeing and what the Trojans are seeing. And the Greeks rejoice. Now, if you're a Greek on the line and you see Achilles, he's saving you, right? Because now the Trojans are so terrified, they run away. So it's like, if you see like a World War II movie, they call them like angels in the sky. You see this in Saving Private Ryan, when they're on the bridge and they're like shooting and they're losing, but then you got the angels on the sky and they drop bombs, on the tanks and save people. You see this in Band of Brothers when they're losing the Battle of the Bulge, and you have these tanks come in to kind of save them or something. And that is what the feeling that a Greek warrior would have at this time. And so 2,000 years later, Patrick Shaw Stewart has the same desire for that. And I'm going to read this really fast one last time. So I hope you'll feel this a little bit more. This poem, I saw a man this morning. I saw a man this morning who did not wish to die. I ask and cannot answer, if otherwise wish I. Fair broke the day this morning against the Dardanelles. The breeze blew soft. The morn's cheeks were cold as cold seashells. But other shells are waiting across the Aegean Sea. Shrapnel and high explosive shells and hells for me. Oh, hell of ships and cities, hell of men like me. Fatal second Helen, why must I follow thee? Achilles came to Troyland, and I to Chersonese. He turned from wrath to battle, and I from 3 days' peace. Was it so hard, Achilles, so very hard to die? Thou knewest, and I know not, so much the happier I. I will go back this morning from Imbros over the sea. Stand in the trench, Achilles, flame-capped, and shout for me. So he's asking, the soldier is asking, he's begging for this kind of savior, and he's going to the Trojan War and Iliad. And the last thing I'll say is that this poem by Patrick Shaw Stewart was written during his leave. When he goes back to war, he dies. So he did not get this, but there's a moment when he says, was it so hard to Achilles, so very hard to die? You knew, and I know not, so much the happier I. Achilles knows that he's going to die. Remember, he's got his fate told to him. Okay, so thank you all for those of you who stuck around. One last time, if you want, check out my Kickstarter. And then here is the link to the Luke Travers event. I'm going to go join that now. So thank you, everybody. This was great. I learned a lot. excuse me, because I want to do more of these, and I'm trying to learn how to do them. I'm actually going to do a live reading here in Austin on, I think, March 20th for my third Thursday. So I actually got a sponsor for that. So I'm excited. So I'm kind of honing on this and trying to learn how to do these a little bit better. So thank you for listening. Go check out my Kickstarter. It ends at the end of March. If it doesn't, get the money, it doesn't get the money, and that's fine too. But I will, that's something I learned, and I'll put Enric one more time up here because he's such a nice guy. Thank you, Enric. Always great to hang out. So thanks everybody. And will I have a live feed for my reading in Austin? No. That's what will you have a live feed? No, I won't have a live feed. Sorry. I'm going to record it though. I always record them. So I really like live audiences. I'll just say that. I prefer live audiences. I think that I do pretty good with live audiences because I just really like the feedback. I like staring at somebody and like, this dude's bored. I got to do something. Like I got to stand up or jump or yell or do something. I got to, rip off my shirt. Although that would just make people run away. But I got to do stuff like, I got to do something, live stream is something I'm interested in trying out some more, but it's a interesting challenge because it's like, who am I reaching I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, but thank you, Enric. Thank you everybody who watched, and I will see you all next time.